This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mommyingwhilemuslim podcast. This is one of your co-hosts, Uzma Jaffrey. My regular co-host, Zeba Hassan, is unable to join us today because of a medical procedure that could not be delayed. And public service announcement, self-care is really important. And that's why she's going to take care of it now before all elective procedures get canceled again. So let's make the odd that all of her results come back normal and she gets a clean bill of health. Allahumma ameen. Today, providing our opening updates is going to be Farheen Reza, who some of you may remember from a couple of weeks ago. Assalamu alaikum, Farheen. How are you today?
Welcome, Salam. I'm good. How are you? And yes, lots of duas too, Zeba. I'm sure people are like, wait, that's not Zeba. And I'm like, it's not Zeba. But
No.
lots and lots of duas to her. May it be easy and whatever she's going through, it's all easy and breezy and good. And we will. And yes, self care is very important, I think, especially in these times. And
hmm
yeah, it's just going. So I will be doing Zeba's parts and
Tell me
I
about
will
your
give
week.
you an update on what I
Yes.
did as a mom this week. This week,
Tell us,
I
tell us.
think I've learned slowly in this time of quarantine that you just have to let a lot of things go and just being accepting in that fact that things are not I'm removing the word normal from my vocabulary for now because we're in the process of redefining what normal is. So I'm just going to think that
hmm
okay, each day is a new day. There are definitely times where everything just seems like a blur and it's all like rolling into one to the other, but we've been watching a lot of movies as a family, which we found, and things that we used to watch as like we watched the whole Lord of the Rings series. And you know what? Surprisingly, there's really very little in that movie that would be offensive or bothersome to anyone. And then, along with that, we've been also working towards talking about race in our home, especially Southeast Asians, because we tend to have this problem institutionalized in us. So, we've been spending time with the kids, going over major historical figures who have paved the way that, like you and I are even in this country and doing the things we're doing is because of people before us. So we've been watching, and surprisingly, I don't know if you can give me suggestions, but and for my kids' age groups, I'm not finding a lot of movies that they can watch because there is, I mean, it was
hmm
not the most easiest time. So things can be very offensive. I mean, we can even get over certain words and languages being used, but, sometimes graphic things come up in movies. So we're having a little bit of trouble finding, easy family friendly movies on race and, civil rights and everything. So we've been watching documentaries and we're having that conversation because it's time. Everyone needs to have this conversation constantly. So that's what's been happening with
Yeah.
me. What's up with you, Isma?
I love that education aspect. And, I know it's all over social media right now and everybody recommended it. And based on their recommendations, I had my kids who are 12, 10, 9, and 5 watch Just Mercy. Which is based on a true story. It
Mhm.
reflects on the unjust incarceration of innocent Black men, usually. And so that's one
Mhm.
resource that I would recommend. And then growing up, I think it could go both ways. I'm not sure that it's the best example, but I remember growing up how important it meant it and how meaningful it was to me. Do you remember Glory with Denzel Washington? It was based on
Yes,
Black
yes.
regiments in the Civil
I
War.
do.
Yeah. So
Yes.
for
That was a
me,
good
that was
movie.
really important to know that Black men died for this country. They died for freedom. And,
Mhm.
it wasn't just based on a political agenda, there was a moral agenda. And
No.
I thought that was
Yeah.
really important. So, I mean, and that's a bloodier
We saw
movie.
Just
So I don't know
Mercy
if you're
last
comfortable
night.
with that. Okay, perfect.
No, I mean, we've kind of, I think again the whole idea going back to the whole mommy issue that of letting things go. There are things that they will
hmm
hear and face in school and they might, I really hope my kids never partake in that, but you never know. You hope that you educate them enough that
hmm
they stay away from that. But so we're like, even if there's language in a movie, we talk to them about it. Like we'll look up on IMDb, look at any curse words or language, and we'll say, hey, this is a bad word. We don't use this word, but in the movie, the actors are using it to get a point across. They don't mean that word in real life,
hmm
but they're just doing their part.
Mhm.
It's a play put on for you, and just think of it that way. It's more troubling when, when there's like, graphical sexual scenes. Then I'm like, okay, how
Sure.
close your
Yeah.
eyes
Yeah.
forward, there's that, all that. So but me and my husband did see Just Mercy last night, and my husband couldn't sleep.
Mhm.
He did not sleep. He's like, it
Aw.
just it hit him so badly, so tough, that he's like, my god, I mean, and you know why you can see this movie was made free to during this time, especially
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
after watching that movie, and that's not too long, the guy's still practicing. I looked him up after. He's still doing his thing. He's
Oh,
still
yeah.
practicing.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
he's
still
still
alive
doing
and
it.
well, doing the same thing with and that
Mhm.
woman is still there. Everyone's still there. So I was like, this is not like history. This is our life,
It's
our
not
lifetimes
over.
that this is happening.
Yeah.
Nope,
Yeah.
it's not. And it really hit hard that, yeah, it is time for a change. And if this is the best way to make change happen is by, protesting during a pandemic, not the best time, but if this is the way, then as in the words of from the Mandalorian, this is the way. Gotta do it. This is the
This
way.
is the way. Absolutely.
This
And
is the
since your
way.
husband can't sleep anyway, have him look up Innocence Project, and so he can find out about more cases where, people have been
Good
unjustly
idea. I'm
incarcerated.
gonna write
So
that down.
since he's
Yeah.
awake anyway, you know?
Mm, okay.
So this week continues I think it's our first week of waiting for the other shoe to drop because it was like, like every third Saturday, it seemed my daughter was having like a hospitalization. So we were just waiting
Ugh.
yesterday. Or wait, what is today? Monday, Saturday. We were waiting Saturday. Like, is
It's
something going to
Monday. It's
happen? Is it
Monday.
not going to happen? And alhamdulillah,
Yeah.
nothing happened. Now it's Monday.
Alhamdulillah.
Um, so my daughter is really annoyed with us because we're hovering over her all the time. Like, I'm okay, leave me alone, I'm fine. Because, when you're young, you're invincible. And then letting things go, as you said, I'm learning to do that. So my son tried to do a soda and sugar experiment recently, and I don't know, it's sparkling water. It wasn't really soda, so it was sparkling water, and he dumped a bunch of sugar in
Okay.
there, and it exploded, kind of like the Coke Mentos thing. So I'm not sure,
Yeah, yeah.
but because it happened, I was like, well, now we got to do this a few more times to figure out what this is, and then we have to work this chemical reaction out on paper to figure out what is happening. I made him clean it up, of course, the
Mm,
entire mess, because he did it right by the stove, and so I have a
of
sticky
course.
stove right now, but
Oh,
let it go. Let it
soda
go.
stove.
Call me Elsa. Yeah, soda stove.
I think we're all Elsa
So,
right now. It's like that's
we're ready.
before it was like the kids mantra to let it go. Now it's like the mom mantra. Like, let it go, let it go.
It's the mom
Turn away
song.
and slam the door.
It's too funny. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So you ready for our soapbox today?
Yes. Let's go.
Okay.
The soapbox. Let's
So
start
I'm
the
on a few
soapbox. What is the
forums.
soapbox, Uzma?
Yes. I'm in a few forums where hashtag Black Lives Matter, like it's related to Black Lives Matter. And what I realize is that there's no Black people commenting. Now, I can't speak for those people who have like generic icons that don't have their faces on them. I'm not sure if the organizers of these spaces are aware of it, but what I'm sensing is that when non Black folks initiate or quote unquote take charge, I think those endeavors will fail or not be welcome, because I don't think that's what good allyship is. I think it's important to recognize the history of Black Revolution in America and know it's powerful. And not only does it have breadth, it also has scope. So Black Americans are, the early activists in their country, but they also knew that their activism didn't stop in the streets. So they set up community clinics, community liaison, hospital reform, established paramedicine as we know it today, our EMS programs, food programs, after school programs, drug rehab, everything, alcohol rehab. They founded these important community and social organizations because they didn't just think about the here and now. They thought about what's happening in the future and how our community is going to continue to be to progress, and how is our activism going to be sustainable. So all of these social services that we've benefited from or that we know are not for Black and poor people. They are by Black and poor people. And so it's because these activists knew that peace doesn't happen when people are sick, hungry, and unemployed. So they made sure that these were there and established to empower people. And so when we think that by creating a march or creating a protest as non-Black people, we're going to succeed. we're really not, because we're not thinking that far reaching scope. We're not thinking about the future of Black people. We're thinking about, hey, there's some momentum. This is IG worthy and we got to do something. So let's just do it. Um,
Yeah.
I just, for those people who think, oh, well, we can do it better than them, or they're not doing anything, so let's just do it. I suggest please sit down. Find the Black led movements and join those. Do not join Uncle Mahmoud or Auntie
Yeah.
Sarah who want to set up a march because, that's like, that seems popular. It's not anything more than an exercise in clearing our conscience. It's not actually doing anything. I hate to break it to you guys.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like we should sit down and listen. And then when we have been told or directed by Black people, the communities most affected by the tyranny and brutality
Yes.
that's going on by the police and institutions in this country, then we can make our signs and we can show up and ask them, what do you need me to do? Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
That's what's going to succeed. Because again, I went to a protest as a medic on Saturday, and
Hmm.
nobody showed. Like, the biggest crowd was like 12 at any point. And yes, it was in the
Really?
suburbs. So, traditionally suburban people are not super activist because that's why they live in the suburbs, like we want to be away from all of that. And I mean, I'm speaking as a suburbanite for life. So, I'm just letting you know. I know my people. So, it was led by non-Black people and teenagers. So, kudos to the
Yeah.
teenagers for putting it together, but they didn't have
I'm
any
seeing a
Black
lot of that this
teenagers
time
directing
around is
this.
students. Oh.
Yeah, and I love that,
So
and I
like
want our
this,
kids to take initiative, but at the same time,
but the also thing is, the whole idea of being an ally,
contemporaries.
allies.
Mhm,
Yeah, you have to
mhm,
reach across the lines and talk to people who are feeling it. I know when the
mhm,
Muslim ban happened, people reached out and they said, "How can we help you?" Because you're a Muslim. And I was like,
mhm,
"Oh, thanks for recognizing that." So we have to do the same things. I think a lot of people are using this time as something for social media versus actual like
mhm.
mental media. That's my new thing right now. I'm thinking because I'm seeing a lot of
Mental
people
media,
posting
mhm,
about the movement, about Black Lives Matter, about listening, about this, but I'm not seeing those pictures come into actions. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not seeing people, they'll say, oh, yeah, we should all listen. Okay, when was the last time you spoke to a Black person? And most people will say, "Oh, this one coworker I have, sometimes I talk to her at the lunchroom." No, that's not talking. That's just being a good employee and a good person to work with. But you need to reach across lines and say, "Hey, this time is tough." I've reached out to friends that I knew in New York in when I was in 5th grade, like years ago, and I'm like, "Hey, just reaching out. This is a horrible time. You just came to my mind. Is there anything I can do as an ally?" I did a whole, I've been talking to people about allyship, and do you even know what it means to be an ally? An ally doesn't mean just yes, I'm gonna make my profile
mhm.
black and say, BLM, and yeah, kudos. It means so much more than that, and it's something I think everyone needs training on what exactly it means to be an ally and what is the responsibilities of being an ally, because I think people don't recognize those responsibilities
Yeah.
as anything more than just, yeah, I'm going to do my basic part, show up here and there. And I'm not saying anything in protests at all. At all. I think protests really get movements going. But I think people also need to realize, like, why are you there? Are
Mhm.
you just there because everyone else is there? Is it a status quo thing, or is it something you truly believe is wrong? And I think, especially in our Southeast Asian communities, Uzma, I feel like this is a time that we really have to reevaluate, because I'm seeing a lot of BLM stuff coming out from like Pakistan and India. And I'm like, yo, you sell like fairness creams like up the wazoo. Like, being white and goody and like that peachy tone, and like each thing has like
Both
those
sides your
shade
mouth,
scales,
yeah.
like this is the shade that you don't want. And it's like, well, can we check ourselves, please? Like, yeah, stop selling that stuff. Famous people, Bollywood, Lollywood, whatever, stop selling that stuff first. Then put up the hashtags and this and that. And anyone who also goes for I mean, I can go on for days on this, and I'm not going too much, but I feel like a lot of the Southeast Asians are still suffering from the British leftover on that, and the things that
Of
they left
course.
behind, where this idea of whiteness. A lot of people who have naturally darker hair are going like super blonde. I mean, look, I change my hair color all the time. I have fun with that, but like the super blonde, blue contacts. Like they're really trying to mimic. It looks like Jessica Alba when she played Mrs. Fantastic years ago in Fantastic Four. I was like, that was just the
Alias?
worst
Oh, that's
miscasting ever.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That movie,
I
remember?
know.
Because
Yeah.
they, instead of
No,
like
we have a lot of
reforming
work
that
still
movie
left
to
to
say like,
do,
okay,
but
Mrs. Fantastic can be, yeah, we have too much. Okay, let's back on topic. Continue. It's your podcast. Continue.
oh, no, no, not at all, not at all. I appreciate it, but what I'm hearing you say is that good allies shut up and sit down. And you wait to be directed rather than grabbing the mic and trying to direct people, which I think is also, besides the colorism that you're
Yeah.
talking about, I think that's a problem that a lot of our parents' generation has because they are grassroots activists and community organizers, but this is not your
Yes.
lane. So you need to learn to take
No.
direction. And I think that's really hard for the uncles and
Yep.
aunties to do sometimes. So I just recommend sit down, shut up, and let them tell us what to do. That's okay. They've done this before.
Yeah.
They know how to
Yeah.
do this.
Educate.
So please
Educate
trust
yourself.
them.
Educate
Give
yourself.
resources,
Yeah.
provide
History books.
resources, and educate ourselves. Exactly. So two
History
weeks
Channel.
ago, we brought
Documentaries.
you on, Farheen,
Yep.
and you kindly talked to us about Shiaism, Sunnism in America, and we just didn't feel that that discussion was done justice, and we had a lot of follow-up questions to that. A lot of, I think, Shia Muslim moms felt more comfortable joining our ranks and our communities online, and we're really
Mm-hmm.
happy about that because we wanted this to be a safe space for all American Muslim moms. And if you're an American Muslim mom, this is for you, period. There's no other
Yep.
qualifier.
Come on in.
So, I know we still can't do justice to this conversation about Shiism, Sunnism in America, but, I think it's important. So, to jog everybody's memory, or for people who didn't tune in last time, Farheen is the producer and host of Musings of a Modern Muslim podcast, talking about cultural stigmas while bringing hope and healing to all. Welcome back, Farheen, and thank you so much for helping us with our updates today.
What's up, Uzma? I'm happy we're talking about this
What's
because this is something I feel people just they want to talk about, but they just kind of brush it aside. And then I'm gonna just put like my little mini disclaimer that I am not a religious authority. I am in no way. I am just a Shia Muslim who practices Shia Islam.
I'm
That's
just a
it.
Shia.
So,
You're not
if
just to
anything I
anything.
say sounds wrong, yeah, it's just I'm talking about my faith, me, myself, and I, and what I practice in my home, in my life. Do not represent all Shia Muslims, and I do not definitely. I am way less than learned than a lot of people out there. So I accept that as just a fault of my own and that I'm human. I'm too busy and I'm a
Yeah.
mom. I'm tired
You can only talk
all
about
the time.
you, and we appreciate that. So, just
Yes.
a summary of
Yes.
where we off last time. So, you told us about how you'd
Sure.
immigrated to the United States when you were a kid, and y'all were happy to hang out with anybody as long as they spoke Urdu and liked biryani because that is the universal language of love.
Yep.
And it didn't matter who was
Yep.
Shia and Sunni, and all the kids got along. But then some of those Sunni kids grew
Yes.
up and decided that you weren't Muslim enough, or they didn't want to hang out with Shias anymore. And then you gave us some
Mhm.
important religious and historical context about where the sects kind of arose, and then clarified
Mhm.
some Shia practices that people may not understand or don't know. Most importantly,
Yeah.
when we wanted to know if it matters whether you're Shia or Sunni in America now, you said yes. And so that's where we wanna
Mhm.
pick up and what we wanna talk about
Yeah.
today. So do
Yeah.
you remember why you said
Well,
yes to that question?
yes. Yes. Yes, I do. Well, it goes back to the same. I'll just repeat the answer I gave that time as well. It's because if you are in a household where you are learning about the differences, that, okay, this person is this type of Muslim and that person is this type of Muslim. And if it's one of your values that it's important to differentiate, not hate anyone else, but just differentiate that, okay, this person is this person is that. And then when you grow up, and if that's a value that you kind of hold highly enough, you will try to seek out, not in friendships, but in a spouse, you will try to seek out that similarity. Because if I'm being raised to love something and you're being raised to just, yeah, I accept that's a part of your history, but it's not that important, and the passion I feel, but the lack of passion you feel, it can become a friction down the line. And I only say this because I've seen it happen way too many times. And I'm all for, reaching across lines, interfaith, and getting together and being your best self and being good people to each other. But that doesn't mean you're married to each other. When I do see marriages where, unless it's not a value at all, there are definitely families who don't care. They're like, no, I'm just a Muslim and I don't care what you are. I'm just a Muslim. I pray to Allah. You know, follow the Prophet, and that's it. That's fine. I've seen those couples work out, but I do see a lot, especially, and I mentioned this last time, when I see it when it comes to kids, that people sometimes make deals, or they will even make this a prerequisite. I know, like, the whole, it's popular to have a prenuptial, but people will have prerequisites, a sort of prenuptial, unwritten, of course, that our kids will be this or our kids will be that. And then when you actually have that child, and you know this, Uzma, when you actually have a baby you've given birth to, or you're holding your child, your feelings that you have pre-planned take a, U-turn and go everywhere else, because your focus and your mindset changes. So we all imagine the type of parents or mothers or birth or labor we would have, but whenever the real thing happens, it's so different that your mindset changes. And I've seen this happen way too many times, where people will get married who are Sunnis and Shias, and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter to us. We're just going to raise our kids Muslim. But when the time comes, and especially because we Shias do have that yearly time, that the first of Muharram, the first Islamic month, is a time of mourning for us, we go back to it. And if you hold that a value, you will go back to it. And then when you get refreshed in that, you're like, well, I want to teach my kid this. I want them to know why we're doing this, why I'm here for the first 10 to 12 days, crying and reliving something, an event, and still feeling emotional about it 1400 plus years later. Like, why am I doing this? I want my kid to know. So then the divisions start slowly and steadily. And that's why when we, in our community, when we look to marriage, and if that is a value you hold highly, that this is important to me, and there are certain things done, we'll cover that in a little bit, where in I believe in the Sunni sect, and you can correct me definitely on this, there are things done that for us Shias they seem almost painful. And it's like, well, how can we connect if we can't agree on this small thing? um for example, the 10th of Muharram, the day of Ashura, which is the day that the Prophet's grandson and his family were martyred, a lot of Sunnis I know fast on that day because, uh, and correct me, I believe they say that it's the birth of Prophet Yusuf, so a prophet preceding, of course, Prophet Muhammad even. And they say we fast for that reason. But in our histories, there's different reasons. Given that you cannot fast on that day, it's a day of not fasting. Any other day of the year, you fast, you get bonus points for that. That day for us is like, no, you cannot fast on this day. And so when we see that happening, you see the friction, it continues. And that friction will kind of be perpetuated yearly when you do see, and like I mentioned last time too, now a lot of times the first of Muharram, we're going into mourning, and we see a whole bunch of Sunni friends and people we are close to and friends with and get along with posting Happy New Year. And it's like, well, I mean, this is not Happy New Year. It's, for us, it's not a happy year. Every year starts with sadness. So that's where that difference is still continuing and continues to be perpetuated. And that's why when it comes to marriage, that's something very specific to marriage, we do try to stick, if the value is important enough, we do try to stick to our own, because then that history of ours is shared and that history will continue.
Um, I appreciate that perspective. The one thing I do think I should clarify is that on the 9th and 10th of Ashura, Sunni
Hmm.
Muslims are primarily fasting because of Musa alayhi salam,
Okay.
Moses, the Exodus, basically. And so it
Hmm.
was the Jews originally fasted on the 9th, and when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, heard about that, said, "Well, we have a greater right to him, so we're going to fast both days." And so that's why they're
Hmm.
fasting to commemorate, freedom from tyranny. So I know it's a completely
Hmm.
different perspective than, I mean, the the Imams Hussein and Hassan were martyred, so it was an example of tyranny. I see that for Shiism, but also for
Hmm.
Sunnis. I mean, it's a great tragedy for both
Hmm.
sects. And I see your point about marriage being tough, but and and you're probably more intimately aware of situations where it hasn't worked out. Have you been aware of situations where it has? Because I feel like I've seen more
Hmm.
situations where it hasn't mattered and the marriages have prospered fine, but I hear you when you say that deals have
Yeah.
been made. So can you talk about some of the
It's
positive experience that you see
I
where
have
love
seen,
kind of was
yes,
like
oh definitely, yeah, yeah, and I don't want to make
mhm,
everyone seem so negative. Yeah, I've seen positive examples. Like let's say I know someone who is a Shia Muslim. She married a Sunni Muslim, and she wasn't
mhm,
a very, I won't say she was moderate. Let's say moderate is the best way to put it. I won't say she was conservative or very liberal, but moderate in her belief system. And then her husband was very liberal, but he was like I'm a Muslim, it's okay. He didn't really mind what they raised their kids as. So then, because he didn't mind, she kind of raised them more with Shia beliefs. Again, with respect to Sunnis as well, because that's her, husband side of the family. But they were, you know what, let's respect that side. But the kids do practice more of the Shia beliefs, especially when it comes to Muharram and prayer times and iftar times and all those things that we have those small nuanced differences. So that is a story I know that has worked out. I know that even let's say if you want to say like this generation is more open minded, I even know of examples that have worked out in the previous generation, like my parents' generation. There were people that we
mhm,
know who were Sunnis and Shias, and they got married, and if they learn to mutually respect each other's religion, I think it works out. It's when you have two very, very like, let's say, devout people. If you have two very devout people on both ends and they both have a certain rigid sense of belief, that's the friction. And then of course, if it's love
yes.
is blind and they get married and whatnot, then that's become. But if you have people who are more open to things and they're willing to learn, I do know of couples who will act. I know of couples who I see even every Muharram. I see people who are Sunni sitting in the mosque with us, and they come to either they come because their spouse comes. But nowadays you can't really force anyone to go anywhere. So when they're coming and they're being part
Mhm,
of it, I think like my job as a Shia at that point is to be more nicer to them, more respectful. I do see a lot of people behaving as if like, oh, why are they here? Oh, look at them. They're wearing such bright colors and this and that. Because in ours, we do wear very muted tones. So black is of course the most common because it's the color of sadness. But then dark greens, dark blues, and then you will see the random person pop in wearing like pink, and you're like, well, must not know the dress code, must not be Shia probably or whatnot. And then I
yeah.
think that you should just be nicer to them because
But I mean,
if they
it's not
see
in the
us being
ideology,
negative
right?
and saying,
It's a
"Oh,
ritual.
no, it's not. No, no. That the outfits is all cultural, but you know how culture
Yeah,
just kind of flits
right.
into tradition and religion so easily. It is all very cultural. A lot of things in
Mhm,
the way Southeast Asians practice Islam and all sects of Islam, not just Shiism or Sunnism. A lot of it is just cultural stuff that's kind of filtered in, and we've accepted as that as this is the way, but it's really not. And that's what I've been doing the past few years. I've been trying to figure out like, are we really that different in many respects? And with interfaith, that's really helped that learning and talking, and even like shows like this where we're talking about it, and we've made it like
mhm.
unwritten deal that we're not going to be offended with each other. We're going to talk things through, and it's fine because this is the way we'll learn. Even if at the end of the day I stay Shia, you stay Sunni, it's fine. We can still be friends and we can still
Yeah,
collaborate and we can still do things. And it doesn't mean like, oh, you know what? I just can't agree with you anymore, Uzma. I think we should just end everything and we can't talk ever again. That's the
I'm
that's
logging off
the
right
the
now.
bridge and the leap we have to overcome. But a lot of people I'm seeing, and you know how I mentioned last time I saw like growing up, a lot of Sunni friends leaving us for our faith. I'm also seeing now meeting more Shia people, Shias who are doing the same thing, who are very anti
Mm,
Sunni, who are very anti other. And that is not the right way either. Because again, in this United States where we are a minority and like the Shias are a minority within a minority, we have to stick together, especially for the public face. Again, we don't have to agree. And I mean, in interfaith, I meet different types of Jewish people. You have Hasidic, you have Reformist, and you have so many different types. Yet they learn to get along. It's like, well, why can't we just get along? Don't en- enforce beliefs
exactly.
on each other. Just say, hey, I have a different way. And I've been to like iftar parties with Sunnis many times. They'll have if they'll open their fast, and ours usually opens 10 to 15 minutes later. I'll just say, you know what, I'll just, you guys do your prayer. I'm fine. And they're like, well, what happens? Will you lose your fast? I was like, no, ours are a little different in belief, but it's okay. We can still break fast somewhat together. It's fine. We can do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you mentioned was that a lot of these rituals are cultural practices. They've been colored by cultural practice. So it's not literally
Hmm.
written or codified in any way, shape, or form that you have to wear black. It's kind of a social standard, and this is an social
Yes.
expectation. And so, what I'm
Yes.
proposing is that in America, we have a whole different set of social standards as Sunnis in our
Yeah.
pocket, in our little section, and Shias in our little section. And what
Yeah.
Zeba and I have found, and I think we agree on, is that America is this colander where the authentic Islam is right here. It's all the good stuff you're saving and all the water, all the stuff you don't want, the stock that you can
Yes.
freeze and use for something else is the culture. We're creating our own
That's the
American
funniest
Muslim culture
example.
here. Right? I mean, the stock
Yeah.
has use.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
throw away the stock. Save it, girl,
Yeah.
freeze it. It can
Yeah.
flavor a lot of other things, but it shouldn't be flavoring the religion. Because, like you said, we're
Exactly.
already a minority in this country. So if we
Within
don't
a
stick together
minority.
and we
Within a
further
minority.
divide, yeah, a minority within a
Yes.
minority. If we further divide, there's strengths in numbers. And if the overall
Yes.
umbrella that we're all willing to stand under is Islam, can you imagine the beauty and the strength in our numbers? And it's
Yeah.
always who's
Mm.
trying to grab the mic, and it doesn't have to be that
It
way.
is.
The mic can be passed along,
It doesn't.
like you're here today
Yeah.
because we needed your voice, we needed your perspective. And I really, I love you, Noma. Thank you for that comment. Noma is saying, waiting for that metaphor to show up in a khutbah. Stock, y'all. Stock is important. Stock is
Stock.
universal, and all
Stock.
mothers
No,
understand
Noma's
stock.
awesome. Okay. Noma is the best
Yeah.
person ever. We love Noma here. We love
Oh,
Noma.
good, you know her.
Thank God she lives
Okay,
here.
love it.
Yes,
Love
yes,
it.
she's awesome, and
Yeah, yeah,
she really is. She's a Sunni Muslim who's really learning about Shia Islam just for educational purposes. Because she's like, I need to know,
yeah.
and
And
so she's been listening. She listens
yeah,
to Sunni scholars, and she listens to Shia scholars, and she's like, I just need to know like the differences, the similarities,
what's the
and
difference?
I'm
Yeah,
grateful that our Shia community has been very open with her, and they've been like, yeah, yeah, definitely come to the events, come to this, come to that, please
yeah,
be a part of it. So I'm grateful that our community has been that way. But Noma is awesome, and she really makes you think. Okay, she'll give you questions. You're like, what?
yeah.
Wow, I never thought of
And I
it
think
that way.
we need to do that. And I'm not trying to dispel that there may be ideological differences between Shia and Sunni, but what ultimately
Hmm.
matters, is our creed. And our Islamic creed, I believe, is the same. I'm not a scholar. I don't want to step outside of my lane, but as somebody
Hmm.
who, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Farheen, but growing up in America in the 80s, there was very much an anti Iran, anti Muslim agenda here in
Yeah.
America. So, there was some plane hijackings, and it was usually somebody of Iranian descent who was on there. So,
Yeah.
oh, well, y'all are hijackers and y'all are terrorists. There was kind of this thread of
Yeah.
racism that went through school and society. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I reacted to that very strongly. And
Hmm.
most of my cousins, my grandmother had 27 grandchildren. Most of them
Mashallah.
do not have the last name Joffrey because they were all born and
Hmm.
raised in America. There were six of us that were born in Pakistan. I'm sorry. All of them were born and raised in Pakistan. Six of us were born and raised here in America. And
Hmm.
even of the six of us born and raised here, three of them do not have the last name Joffrey. So they all dropped it. And why? Because in Pakistan, you couldn't get a job if you were Shia or you were considered Shia. So
Hmm.
you wouldn't get into the right schools, you wouldn't get the right jobs. So they had to drop the Shia last names so that they could be employable, so that they could go to better schools, which is unfortunately, I think it may still happen. I'm not sure. But because we had the
Hmm.
advantage of being born and raised in this country, it didn't matter. Like nobody knew what Jaffrey was,
Yeah.
until Aladdin came out, nobody knew Jafar or
Mm.
anything. So um,
Yeah.
in any case, it was reacting to that kind of injustice. Like, why aren't all of my cousins Joffrey? It's because they're discriminated against. And you know who I blamed? I
Yeah.
blamed Shias. And I was like, it's the
Hmm.
Shias' fault that my cousins are being discriminated against. It's the
Yeah.
Shias' fault that all these hijackings are happening and we're
Yeah.
getting discriminated against as Muslims in America. And so I was super anti Shia until I was 28 years old. So it was that long. Like
Wow.
I was like, if you're Shia, you're not a Muslim. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look at you. Well,
Hmm.
no, I take it back. Not until I was 28, probably until I was 19. And I was praying every day. Like I would pray my prayers on campus. And there was this girl who wore like a black abaya. And I didn't understand what she was doing, but she had the rock and she had a piece of cloth that she would make sujood on, she would prostrate on. And I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I found out much later, maybe even after we graduated, that her dad was like a big Shia scholar, and she herself was very learned
Mm.
in Islam and Shiism in particular. And I was like, well, she's probably exceptional. And then at 28, I go to a class taught by a major Sunni scholar in America. And he was teaching nothing other than Islamic creed, aqidah. So, what makes us Muslim? And he mentioned the
Hmm.
sects that are not considered Muslim. And there were quite like every hand goes up in that Sunni audience. They're like, but what about the Shia? What about this? And they're trying to get his attention. And he's like, I know who I mentioned and I know who I did not mention. I know who I mentioned and I know who I did not mention. And girl, that put me in my place. And that made me say, Astaghfar, forgive me, Allah, for being a racist all my life, for being anti Shia
Hmm.
all my life, because whether we like it or not, this
Hmm.
is a common history. We have common creed. And in America,
Hmm.
where nobody's going to discriminate, they're going to be equally discriminatory against Shia and Sunni because
Yeah.
we're both
They don't
Muslim.
care
We're
which
considered
one of
the
us is which.
non-white enemy. They
Yeah.
don't know the difference. And
No.
they're
Yeah.
ready. Like, when we go out and we give these interfaith lectures, well, why is there a division in Islam between Shia and Sunni? What's the difference? Well, tell me the difference. There's this huge rift that we always learn about between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Come on. So,
Yeah.
if y'all can have it, sure as sugar, we can have it. We may be a young
Yeah.
religion, but we're not that young. So I
No.
think a
No.
difference is allowed when you have a huge number of people. When a quarter of the world's population is Muslim, you're going to be having some differences of opinion. And my point
Of
is that
course.
when you bring it over to the United States on this shore, you can have those. I don't even think it's an interfaith marriage when it's Shiaism and Sunniism. And I think you can be
Yeah.
a practicing Muslim, a practicing Shia, and a practicing
Yeah.
Sunni. And I think you can find common ground because when it comes to observing rituals, I mean, if you can just respect, I mean, ideally, you're marrying a partner because you respect them and you know what's coming
Hmm.
with them, and you know that those parents and their expectations are coming too. So if you're going to have to fast or not fast
Yep.
on a certain date, and fasting on the 9th and 10th of Muharram is highly recommended, but it's not required like Ramadan. It's not mandatory. So
Yeah.
as long as you're fulfilling your mandatory tenets, like the things you must do in
Yeah.
Islam for both parties, you're on the same page.
Yeah.
And my argument and my
No.
stance is that in America, you can do that, and love can conquer even that division that I feel like non Muslim people are so ready to pounce on and create amongst us. Does that make sense?
There, that's true. That's true. And then yeah, yeah, definitely. And I like the whole stock example because that makes perfect sense. And yeah, the ideological differences that in Shiism that we do have, a lot of the things, yes, definitely we have the fillers of, traditional, things that have kind of made their way into it. But there are equally a lot of ideological differences that are written because I know, like, we have interpretations that are still currently happening. We have marjas and ayatollahs who are actively researching a lot of, original text and translating it and bringing it over to kind of help us, uh, you know, navigate this current world with, you know ideas and ideology that was written down, 14, 1600 years ago. So we do have differences, but it's only if you allow those differences to become a barrier. Again, like, I could definitely say that on the this whole fasting example on not allowed, you should respect my.
I think
No,
we
I'll
have
probably
just,
say,
oh, there we
no,
go.
we don't fast because. Oh, you have me? So we have that written down for us. So yes, we make sure that we don't fast on that day. We'll definitely say that we agree with the whole Exodus history, and that is definitely true. That happened. But after that, I mean, Prophet Moses precedes Prophet Muhammad. I don't like by how many hundreds of years, I guess, right? Hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, that
Few
happened
centuries,
definitely, but then
millennia.
something negative happened on that day. It's the idea that like having a family member born on 9/11. It's like, well, you can never have happy birthday because you were born on 9/11. Well, no, yes, a bad thing happened then too, and a good thing happened. So you can kind of celebrate those things separately. But in our just to make that the clarity there, in our religion it says not to fast on those days. That particular day it says do not fast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is the day that almost
Mm,
anything and everything, unless it is absolutely like necessary, everything is kind of forbidden. I know, I've even seen over the years, Uzma, which makes us Shia sad. Like I've seen even nikahs and weddings happening on Ashura, and it's like, well, I mean, really, like, okay, I mean, really, unless it's like an absolute. I know that, of course, our religion gives wonderful loopholes everywhere. I know of examples where someone was dying and they just wanted to see their child get married, so their nikah happened on Ashura. It was just like like between like literally, husband, wife, one imam, and then the dad. That's it. And they were like, just so he could, die in peace. That I am seeing this and done. But when you see people
mm-hmm.
doing things on purpose, it kind of, like I said, perpetuates that divide. It's like, well, I mean, I've been invited to weddings sometimes within the first 10 days of Muharram, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't come. They're like, why not? And I was like, It's, these 10 days, these 12 days initially are very important for me and for my religion. I'm sorry, I've had to miss a friend's wedding because they said that, well, this is the only time it works out for us. I was like, you know
Mm,
what, go for it. I will not be there. And that causes this divide because
mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, I understand that, again, if there is something, excess, that cannot prevent it from happening. But it's like, well, when you choose certain days to do things, and definitely our Shia calendar is very busy. We have we have the 12 imams, we celebrate each of their birth
Mm-hmm.
dates and each of their death dates. So our calendar is very full all year round. But like Muharram becomes like this one like big bulk time where we're like, if you can just not do things on this time. I've been invited to weddings, to birthdays, to amins, to dawats, to parties, all on those days, and I've had to say like, I'm sorry, no, I'm not coming. And then people are like, well, why are you so stingy about religion? I was like, well, this part of me is very important. I'm very connected to that part. So what am I what forget my kids. What am I teaching myself if I you know what, it's my friend's wedding. It's only gonna happen once. Let me just go. I can't give that. I can't, think of my Imam Hussein again in the same light than if I'm willing to ignore him one year. Unless again, if it's absolutely necessary and there's no other option, again, you have the loopholes everywhere. But that's when it becomes harder
Sure.
to
I mean,
kind
I
of
think we agree on the
bridge those
tradition.
divides when you see those things. Yeah. When you see people like
Yeah. I think
openly
we
doing those
share
kind of
that.
things, and then again, I'll blame on myself. We'll blame the Shias too. I see a lot of times Shias in like in majlis, in our gatherings, they will happily sit there and give lanat to certain sahaba, which we may not agree with. But again, I don't believe in doing that. Like, oh, curse you, curse you, curse you, curse you. The only that
Mhm.
I, in my limited learning, that I found the only ones we kind of curse, which again, Islam doesn't really promote cursing anyone like Lanat
Right.
as much, but were the 2 to 3 people who martyred Imam Hussein. Like those people, yes, Lanat on them,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
we will
Mhm.
happily do Lanat on them. But anyone else, nowhere does it say to. And I see people, like you're seeing the name Joffrey, you got like the bad, images when someone, oh, are you Shias? There are times when we meet someone named Aisha
Mhm.
or Umar or Humaira or Hafsa, and they're like, oh, no, 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 man, no, 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 that's not one of us. And so it's the same thing. It's a two-way road. We Shias cannot say that,
Oh,
oh,
yeah,
we
yeah.
can't say that we're the only victims. Sometimes we do the same things to others, and that is
Mhm.
also wrong. We shouldn't do
Are
that
the
either,
perpetrators. Yeah,
because end of the day, it's a
yeah.
Muslim. It's the person who, it's the same person. If you go to the basic, that person loves Allah and follows the same prophet, let's just keep it those two basics. Then even if they follow a different part of that religion, does not mean that they are to be hated. Because if we don't want to be hated, we can't hate other people either,
Exactly.
right? We just can't do that.
Mm. Exactly. We have a comment from Zainab Heather Ali who says in Shia Islam, we believe the story of Hazrat Musa or Moses for Ashura is fabricated. It doesn't show up in history books until after the events of Karbala or the massacre at Karbala that you taught us about last time. So that's not something that I ever
Hmm.
knew. So thank you for sharing that. I was not aware of it.
You know what?
I think an
I
important
didn't know
topic
that
to
either,
discuss.
but
Oh, mhm,
I wouldn't doubt it. I only not for the Shia aspect, but because I went to a Catholic college, so I had like 4 years
mhm.
of Catholicism. So I'm like half Catholic in my head sometimes. I'm like I know their whole religion inside out because our college was a Catholic college and they required certain courses that you had to take. So I was actually
Yeah.
taught under priests and fathers and all those people. So I was like, okay, I know this stuff. So when I learned that even the history of Jesus Christ was written 200 years after he had, you know, died and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, in 200 years, you're going to forget some details, right? I'm sure. So I'm sure,
Yeah.
history
Yeah.
again, history is written by the writers. So whoever's
Men.
writing it
Yeah.
at whatever time they're writing it. And yeah, there are, I agree, there are things that have come to light after or before or later or suddenly. um it does make a difference, and I think, but that's a question I would definitely say refer to someone definitely more learned than me. and, and I'm gonna put Uzman in
Definitely.
that same boat.
Yeah.
Don't
It's not gonna be
we
me because
we'll
I'm
take
still
that
gonna be
comment, and
fasting on
I
the ninth and 10th of Muharram because
yeah,
I believe the history is true.
yeah,
So, and that's not based
yeah,
on
yeah,
historical
and we
textbooks.
won't
I
fast because we'll
believe
say no, we're not
it
supposed
based
to.
on, yeah. Yeah, that's outside of our lane for sure. But, if we believe in the science of hadith, then, there's an authentic hadith for the Sunni
Yeah.
Muslims that they follow, and that's why they practice what they practice. And, as non historical scholars and non imams, neither you or I can speak to that. I want to go back to something that you brought up
Definitely.
earlier, Fahim, which was that you're noticing that the divisions between Shia and Sunni are actually getting worse now. Can you explain why
Hmm.
you believe that's true?
Well, again, my belief only, what I've seen, because I'm going on my history. I'm saying in the past, 15, 20 years where I've seen a lot of people kind of distance themselves, people who we grew up with. So I'm talking like, childhood friends suddenly be very distant. That really, makes you think that, hey, what happened if I didn't, unless I did something wrong? Okay, fine, then let me know that I do something wrong. But when you start noticing people being distant and and sir and again, I'm not saying this about all Sunni imams. There's a lot of wonderful imams who are all for unity and who actually do highlight a lot of Shia things that I've even seen myself. So, but there are equally, just like in our faith, there are people who do preach this kind of that Shias are what's that word that they're using in Saudi Rafidis, and they put like the
Mm,
alphabet R everywhere, and that we're Rafidis and there were kafirs, and we're just not, we're crazy and we should be, and we are, and I think they even, some of them preach that we are allowed to be killed. It is you will get heaven if you kill us. So that kind of thought is still out there, and when that thought is out there, that's like any dangerous thought that we know. I mean, we see examples of extreme thought in our religion. Of course, we have 9/11 that happened. We have the Taliban. We have all these extreme things that have happened because of misinterpretations of teachings that, and we
mhm.
all, I mean, as Muslims, we all speak out that our religion does not promote killing. How many times have we quoted the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying that, killing one person is killing all of mankind? So why would we even allow this kind of thing in our religion? But when the misinterpretations continue, so when you see this kind of stuff that Shias are Rafid and they're kafirs, they need to be killed, and they have, and killing them is a good thing, and putting them down is a good thing, you're getting more favor with Allah for doing that. That is, and if any one person listens to that and that one person takes that home and spreads it to his own family, you're gonna get down that road where people will see us as the other, and when we get that feeling that, hey, we're the other, we're not wanted, then it's like, well, are we on the same playing field? Then we're not. And I will give you that example where I'm sure you saw that young girl that was killed in England, Aya Hashem. She was killed in a drive-by
Yeah.
that was not, she was not targeted. She was just at the wrong place, wrong time. And then her family is refugees, I believe, from Jordan or somewhere. I might be misquoting that, but And then when people said, and this was in Ramadan, so you can imagine Ramadan is like the, this is the time of giving, of charity, of goodness. And we all universally, all Muslims in Ramadan are more giving, we're self reflecting, we're cleansing, we're doing all the good things because this is the holy month. So when I saw when people were raising money for her so that she and her family, because again, they're refugees, they're not well off, she's a law student, she was doing her part to be a better person, got killed, and her family's poor. And when people were raising money, there was a whole GoFundMe, and then suddenly one person said, "Hey, wait a minute, she's Shia," and then the money being taken back, people asking for it back,
Mm.
prominent people saying that, "Oh, no, 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 I did not know that she's Shia, so I shouldn't have given money for that." And so, I mean, when you have an example like that, and that was so recent, it's like, well, don't you feel that divide? Like we
Hmm.
feel it. We're like, well,
It's
she's a
painful.
young girl who was killed, who was just doing nothing, nothing. She was just at the wrong place, wrong time.
Hmm.
Not a bad person. Even if she was a bad person, even if she's a horrible person, still a human being. But when people start taking their money back, and I'm thinking, well, these are other Muslims doing this in Ramadan. It hurt. It definitely hurt,
Yeah.
and it felt like, well, will they ever see us as Muslims beyond the Shia label that we have? Will they ever see like, oh, this sect of Islam is descended from that same prophet's grandchildren? So it's like we're just extended
Mhm.
cousins of you guys, technically. And
Yeah.
so when that example came up, and that being so recent, it was painful to see. And then, and you know what the family did with that money? They actually built a mosque,
Mm.
I believe, in Jordan or wherever they're from, and it was a Sunni mosque, because they were like, well, there's more Sunnis here, so we'll build a mosque for them in her name. And it's like, well,
Mm.
can we not be like the family that's doing this across the line thing versus people just take? And I'm and the positive note in that, there were definitely many Sunni scholars and people who did speak out. They're like, that is wrong, you
Yes.
should not do that.
Yeah.
If that young
Hmm.
girl died, this is not the way we practice it. But again, you have 10 good voices, but that one bad voice, that bad voice is perpetuating a
It's the
lot of
loudest,
negativity.
yeah, and that's the one that's gonna get
It
the
is.
attention because that's newsworthy,
Mhm,
right? Because again, I feel like there's an
mhm,
agenda to create a divide that's outside of us,
mhm.
that's outside of the Muslim
Yes.
community, and I sincerely believe that that agenda is there and strong, and they'll do anything, including orchestrating some of these events in order. I'm not saying that they orchestrated a drive-by on a child, but or a young girl, but what I'm saying is they're orchestrating, the stance and the I guess the viralness of whatever situation in order to create further
Yeah.
division. We have another comment about somebody who wants us to talk more about Shia killings, particularly Shia killings for the sake of somebody
Mhm.
being Shia and in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But again, as we have said before on other podcasts, our focus is Muslim American moms and what we deal with
Yeah.
here. And we do not have
Yeah.
the authority or the experience to speak on Sunni Shia killings because guess what? It happens on both sides. Typically in Muharram, it happens, and it's
Yeah.
particularly doctors, right? All the doctors are scared in Pakistan because during Muharram,
Yeah.
the Sunni
Yeah.
doctors will get shot in their
Yeah.
cars, and then the Shia doctors will get shot in retaliation in their cars. And it's just this retaliatory crossfire for the 10, 12 days. It's absolutely stupid.
Of killing
We
people
can't
who
speak to
really
that because
are
A, it's
needed. Like
stupid.
doctors, stop doing it, doctors.
Yeah,
Stop,
doctors,
stop it.
because they
Stop
know
it.
you kill one
It's
doctor, you
doctors.
kill
Stop
10
killing.
people. Yeah. So
Yes.
kill the
Yes.
highest
And
echelons
prominent
of who
doctors.
can help us.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, even
No,
my aunt
and
is
you
a
know what?
doctor in
Yeah,
Pakistan in
that's
Karachi,
something
and
definitely
she
I
fears
would
for
I
herself.
think, because we're keeping this to mommying while Muslim in America. We'll keep it at that. I mean, that
Yeah.
person is more than welcome to, message me or message you separately, and we can talk about it, separately on, offline, because that is definitely a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it does happen on both ends, and it continues. But yeah, that is something I think if
And
we
the
get into that
reason
topic, we're gonna start fighting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not afraid of the fighting. What my thing is, we're in America. So again, when people, Islamophobes come to us and say, but in Saudi Arabia, they do this, and in Indonesia, they do that, or in China, they do this. It's like, I can't speak for those countries because I'm an American. I've lived here my
Yeah.
whole life. So this is the
Mhm.
experience I can speak to you about.
Yeah.
We have a
I can
comment
empathize
from
with the
Mir
people
Ali.
abroad.
Oh, Yes,
Go ahead.
absolutely.
Sorry.
But let me read this comment real quick. Before we teach religion to our kids, we need to teach them compassion, respect differences, and teach our kids. Oh, respect differences. And then part of that, I can't read, it's blurred. Respect our differences and not just teach our kids religion and fail to teach basic human rights. So, like you are about to say, Farheen, go ahead and say what you were going to say about basic human rights.
Well, we can empathize. That's I think empathy is something that our religion really highlights, but as people we don't learn. And people say, "Well, I feel sorry for you." Well,
Hmm.
like, well, can you learn the difference between sympathy and empathy? Empathy, yes.
Hmm.
Whenever we hear of any Muslim being, I mean, don't we collectively take a deep breath whenever anything bad happens to Uzma? And it's like, I hope it's not a Muslim because we get scared. We're
Please,
like,
Allah.
we have PTSD, all of us. We're like, we're like, oh God, please
Yes.
don't be a Muslim. And that's horrible because we're not thinking that, oh my God, people just got killed about something. We're like, let's hope it's not a Muslim. And it's bad, but
Hmm.
that's because we're all suffering from this PTSD that we've been like all given collectively. And
Hmm.
empathy is what we're missing. And empathy is not just for across religions. We need empathy. Going back to the Black Lives Matter, we need empathy for them. We need empathy all around. We deserve empathy, and
Yeah.
we need to give more empathy. That, hey, I'm
Yeah.
sorry this is happening to you. I feel your pain. I may not understand it. I'm here for you, but I feel it. And you know what? I feel pain too when I see things happening to my community. I feel pain when I see things happening to children. I feel pain when I see things happening to kids in cages. I feel pain, physical pain. And that's when kind of
Mhm.
grow that empathy in us so that we can get beyond things and discuss things without ending up which you know what I see a lot of times when people have these conversations, they always end up in an argument. They're yelling over each other, they're talking
Mhm.
over each other. The only reason we're talking over each other is if
But
it's
what
tech.
about
We're not doing
yeah.
we're not doing it on purpose. We're not doing it on purpose. But it's like when you see people, it's always a fight. It always ends up in a fight, in an argument, in bad feelings, in borderline name calling. And that's a conversation time that you have wasted. You have lost footing. You've taken
Mhm.
10 steps back instead of taking one step forward. And so when we learn to empathize
Mhm.
that, okay, we can walk away today agreeing that I'm not going to fast on 10th of Muharram, you can fast on 10th of Muharram. Good for you, good for me, bye bye. I may not agree, you may not agree, but we're still going to be okay at the
Mhm.
end. And it's not like it's
Yeah.
and again, I think if we stop thinking, there is this, I don't know if this it's a misconception just because in Pakistan, India, that's kind of filtered over to the US, where everyone thinks that our job is to convert everyone else. And that is something I
Right.
learned in
Right.
interfaith, where one of the main goals in our little pamphlet interfaith, the main thing is written down: you're only speaking from your perspective, and you are not here to convert anyone. When you take that whole piece
Right.
out of it and you can just talk as you, me, myself, and I about my things, it makes
Uh-huh.
it so much easier to talk about instead of aiming to convert. I've seen people that have just by listening to another person decide to convert. Welcome, good for you, but that was your choice. I didn't tell you you have to do this.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, a more stronger
Mhm.
person coming because, like, okay, well, you heard my story. You thought, hey, this sounds interesting. Let me do my own research. Can you guide me into different research or books? Here you go. Here's some resources. Do your own thing, figure it out yourself. And when they do and they come,
Uh-huh.
that's great. And even if they decide at the end, hey, you know what? It's not for me. Okay, that's fine. But empathy, empathy times a billion empathy.
I agree with all of it. And again, just coming back to American soil, things like, and I want to think about, 15, 20 years in the future when our kids are getting married. I mean, come on. The Muslim community, there's some slim pickings out there for the people who are trying to get married now. So I'm trying to be
Yes.
forward thinking and be like, I'm not going to limit my kids. I don't think I can afford to limit my
Hmm.
kids to you must only marry a Sunni.
Yep.
You know, I'm even considering, I don't think, I mean, I'm going to try. But for me, it's important that they're Muslim. If they identify as Muslim, that's like it. I don't
Yeah.
care if you've got one eye in the center of your forehead. I don't care if you have a horn growing out of your shoulder. I don't care about anything else, like that's my basic criteria. And of course, that the
Yeah.
couple respects each other, whichever of my kids is going to partner up. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking, as staunchly anti Shia as I was in my background, I feel like I've come to a very
Yeah.
happy place in the middle. And I'm like, if you can respect each other and agree to disagree and come to the table and share the mic like you and I are doing and walk away even from each other temporarily saying, we don't agree on this thing and we can be okay
Mhm.
because maybe this is a ritualistic
Mhm.
practice, maybe this is a historical difference, but at the end of the day, we love each other, we identify as Muslim, we're going to continue growing Muslims in this country, but this is how we're going to practice Islam in America. That's what I really want for my kids, you know.
Mhm.
Noma's like, eye in the middle of the forehead is Dajjal. Okay, you're right, I should have that criteria too.
Yeah,
No eye
yeah,
in the middle of your
yeah,
forehead,
yeah.
you
I
can
was
have it
gonna
off
say
to
that
the
too, and I
side.
was like, "You sure?" I was
The
like, "You sure
Antichrist,
you
yeah.
want that one?
Yeah, no,
You
I
sure
take it back.
you want the
I
Antichrist to
take
marry your
it
kid?"
back. Poured out of your
I was like,
shoulder is
"Really
okay,
now? Wow, Uzma."
but you must identify as Muslim. I know, I'm like super cool mom, right?
It's
No,
like
no,
you've
no.
gone from
Um,
anti-Shia to anti-Christ loving.
to Antichrist, totally, or pro Antichrist. No, no, no. I don't want to say that. I think that we cannot afford to further divide on American soil. And to be very frank, I would be highly surprised if my kids even knew the difference because our Masjid Alhamdulillah is so inclusive. We've had Shias praying there too.
Mhm.
And my kids will sometimes come and ask, and
Good.
like, why do they pray that way? Oh, well, they're a different sect and that's how they pray. And guess what? In Sunniism, there's so many different ways to pray. Of course, there's going to be a difference
Yeah.
between Sunnis and Shias. So who cares? Like
Do you know it's
your
surprising
grandma
actually?
moves her
Many
finger
Shia
during
women actually
Tashahhud, and I
do
don't.
pray. Do you know there are actually many
Say that
Shia
again?
women who do pray with their hands folded? There are many Shia women who actually
Oh, I
pray
didn't
with
know
their
that.
hands folded, and I've seen it. Yeah, yeah, and it's like so. And
Uh-huh.
when I was younger, I saw them, and then my mom was like, "No, there are some Shia women who do that," and I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever."
Very cool.
Didn't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it wasn't allowed. Okay,
So,
so but it
it's
was like,
just,
okay,
I think when we generalize and when
yeah,
we decide that we're not going to be okay with somebody, what I want to leave everybody with today is uh, permission to do that. Permission to be fluid and to be
yeah,
dynamic because what we believe and practice today, inshallah, like the essential practices that make us Muslim and differentiate us from non Muslims are going to remain. Authentic Islam is always going to remain because we believe as Muslims that it's timeless, but that those cultural backpacks that we have on that have but what about what's
mm-hmm,
happening in Pakistan? What about what's happening in India? Guess what, sisters? Guess what, brothers? We don't live there. We ain't dying there anytime
mm-mm.
soon, at least. So we care about what's
No, no,
happening
no,
here
never.
on this side of the planet. And on
Yeah,
this side of the planet, I
yeah,
think we get to take those backpacks off and we get to say, we're gonna we're gonna roll with the punches, we're gonna roll with the times, we're going to preserve our authentic
mm-hmm,
Islam, and we're not gonna further divide. That's my hope and my prayer, at least.
yeah. I think the funny thing is me and my husband discuss this a lot. Sometimes we're like, and from my family personally, because we are such staunch Shias, that would be the preference. And I say preference with a highlight, like big highlight, bold exclamation point, stars pointing it. There are, as parents, even our parents, when they were looking for spouses first, there's preferences. And then certain preferences you hope get met. Sometimes they don't get met. And you have to, because again, like I said, when you
Mhm,
even plan motherhood or giving birth, we all have plans in our head. Does not mean they're going to happen. You can always have preferences,
mhm.
plans, likes,
They all
pros, cons,
backfire,
whatever
right?
list you have. But you can always be ready that, hey, you know what? Something like we discuss this all the time, that how are we going to deal with dating when the kids in like other kids in our kids class
Mhm.
will be dating and we'll say, no, you can't date. And we're like, you know what? The Shia Sunni problem is one thing at the end, but this is going to be a problem that's going to come up pretty soon because we have a 10-year-old who's going on
More
50.
immediate.
So it's like, well,
Mhm, mhm.
maybe we'll have to talk. Yeah, that's a more pressing concern right now versus marriage. We're like, okay, get this boy educated so he is a good match and can, not just take care of a family because that thought is also gone, but can be a good person and practice in a field that he likes and he enjoys and, be capable so that we don't have to worry about him. And then we are also thinking like, what if he's like 15, 16, all his friends are dating and hanging out and going on out and God knows what else. And we're like, what do we do? What do we do? That's a big concern. And because it's
Yeah,
it's you
and you
hear
don't
of
have
younger
to
and
be
younger
a
couples,
Sunni
so
or
it's
a
like,
Shia to worry about that. Yeah. Most Muslim
no, that's
moms
a
are also
universal Muslim
grappling with that
problem.
and worried about that. Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, we're
And
all, and then
so,
you even, and then more than
I
that, you're pressing about, kids eating something that they're not supposed to eat at school because someone else like put it in their
mhm,
plate, and you're like, well, what was that? And they're like, oh, my friend said this is, bacon. And I was like, ah, y'all save us. It's like
yeah,
these are more concerns we're having now. I think in 10 years, our
right,
concerns will all change totally. But again, go with
yeah,
the punches. Can't worry too much about the far
go with the
future.
punch,
Worry about now and getting
because we
it's
can plan, but
as they say,
Allah is
it's
the best
not.
of planners.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And we can only, we can only do this marathon slowly and steadily. We can't sprint. We'll we'll
Mhm,
we'll just gas out then.
yeah. It is a marathon, and for what it's worth, like,
Yep.
even in my generation, I found in America, it's mattering less and less, the labels of Sunni and Shia, because I have relatives that intermarried and they're doing just fine. I mean, there's a little bit of hiccups here and there, again, over rituals and cultural practices, and it's it's oh, I like
Mhm.
this. This next comment I'm gonna read. There are little hiccups that come up along the way, usually over ritual practices, and everybody gets over it. You know, marriages aren't dissolving
Yeah.
over this particular issue, thank goodness. It's usually over compatibility
Yeah.
stuff that has nothing to do with religious practice, and I'm really happy about that. Somebody is promoting the establishment of a sushi community, which would be mixed Sunni
Yeah.
Shia. But I would hope that we would
Yep.
just go by the label of Muslim community, and that would be okay by me. Now, when I was being matched with my husband, I don't know if I talked to you about this, but my father-in-law was convinced based on my name that I was Shia and like wouldn't believe me. So my
Mhm.
husband was courting me at the time and asked me multiple times, like, "Are you sure you're not Shia? Are you sure not?" I think I would know, you know?
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
was like that was an issue, and my husband was like, "I was raised in this country, like, I don't care even if she is, what does it matter?" You know? And his dad couldn't explain to him.
Yeah.
And then, I guess he
Yeah.
verified with my father the day he came over to ask for my hand that we were in
Yeah.
fact Sunni. But, again, my
Yeah.
husband didn't care. So I don't see my children caring. And I'm actually hoping that it won't matter. And I'm praying that it will matter less to me because, like you, I would like to decrease any opportunity for discord in my children's household. But guess what? That's not up to me to control anyway. So we can only
No.
pray, we
No.
can plan a little bit, but ultimately it's planning what's before us and not what's coming way forward in the future, other than building the blocks of compassion and empathy that we talked about earlier for all of our
Yeah.
fellow man,
And
especially
again,
for
that's
Muslims in
that's the
America
thing. We
who
all we all just want the best for our kids, and that's where our goal is as mothers. Number one goal is we just want the
Mhm.
best for them, and we try to be puppet
Yeah.
masters and control everything. But sorry, our strings are also being taken care of by some other part, being upstairs.
Thank
So
you,
we have to
COVID.
kind of let go of these things. Yeah. And then also, it also comes back to like the initial point I made. It depends really on how devout you and your spouse are and how much it matters to you. So you can have people,
Mhm.
again, one very practicing in one way, one not practicing, they learn to kind of mesh together. If you have two very strong personalities, they will clash. And if they're very, very firm on their beliefs, you will have clashes. In that case, you should really and you hope like before the marriage happens, you can kind of foresee that, like, wait a minute, maybe this person might not be a match for you based on your belief system and based on their belief system, because this can become a clashing point for you guys in the
Mhm.
future. And to avoid that, maybe you should look elsewhere. Again, it's only on each individual case by case basis. There's no broad brushstroke here.
Case by case is
Each
what you're saying.
person
Yeah.
has a, and I could be a certain way of practicing, and even though I instilled that values in my son, he might still be a different way of practicing. He might have his own thoughts and his own mind because
Exactly.
that's what they have their own brains, and each person
They
has
have
to
free
accept
will.
that. And I know a lot of parents, yes, free will, a lot of parents struggle with that because they're like, well, I taught you better. Yes, you did your level best, but again, even, a lot, and in our belief system, it is our Imam Ali said that, until the age of 7, your child is the king, and from 7 to 14, they are beneath you, you're learning from them. From 14 plus, they should be on the same level as you because they are
Mhm.
their own free will mind being. And after 14, it seems very little, but after 14, you should have taught them enough that if they have a certain value they uphold, they'll hold on to it no matter what you do or say. And you have to use them as advisors. And that's a pretty big thing to say to, Muslim parents, like, okay, at age 14, you're my advisor. Wait a minute. I got like 30 plus years on you, kid. And it's like, no, but they are of the same mental, religious values are set in stone then. And you will, and even you see if people, you see families where kids will leave the religion. I've seen a lot of this happening. Well, they'll turn 14, 15. I'm done with this religion. I don't care about it. They'll leave. Then they come back. And it's like, and they come stronger than ever.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, you know what? Let them, you
Mhm.
have to be okay with them discovering that
Explore.
because that'll happen. I'm sure. I don't know if you
Yeah.
went through it. I went through it. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. Now you come back and you're like, you know what? It
Mm.
does make sense to me. I'm going to stick to this one.
Yeah.
And there are people I've known who never came back. And it's just
Yeah.
let the big guy upstairs do all the work on that. We can do
Yeah.
only so much.
And in the meantime, as the people down here on the ground, we don't need to cut ourselves up any more than we're already being cut up by external
Yeah.
forces, is kind of where I wanted to end this. And I thank you so much for continuing this really important conversation with us and sharing your point of view
Yes.
and your experiences. I think it's really important when we're talking about marginalized folks. I have felt always that Shias were marginalized, and it was really important for us to end that here. And I think that the best place we can do it is not just on this podcast, but in the United States. We can end it together just by building these
Hmm.
bridges and building
Yes.
empathy for each other and having the conversations that people don't
Hmm.
seem to want to have.
Hmm. And thank you guys for having me here. And I know this is the part two, and it's like this is a long. I think we could go like part 50, and it'll never end. But it's like, well, let's just end it
Yes,
because
yes.
again, we're not scholars, so we're
Yeah,
just people. We're just moms. We're just different types of moms. And thank you again for having me on this. And this, I'm hoping if even if one person learned one thing, is that look at the end of the day, we're
yeah.
walking away still friends. We're still gonna text each other. We're gonna
Yes,
talk, and we're
exactly.
gonna have fun. But
Yes.
and that's all
And we're
you
going to
need to know
collaborate and we're
at
going to
this
enjoy
point.
ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks
Yes,
again.
exactly.
And I can't wait to talk to you soon, probably on WhatsApp in a few minutes.
Yep.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another episode. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.